Okay, in this video I just want to discuss a couple of final things in relation to the terms of trade. Just first of all, in terms of recent history with the terms of trade, as I said, the export price index increased significantly between 2000 and 2011 as a result of growing overseas demand. And then since 2011 it started to slow, and that's mainly due to increased global supply. In terms of the import price index, that went down a little bit because of advances in technology and increased international competition amongst different firms. It fell in the early 2000s from 114.8 to 98.2. So you can see, at this point here, we would have had a really low terms of trade when average export prices were 58.8 and the index for import prices was 114. And then by 2011, we'd had the terms of trade above 100 because export prices averages were higher than import price averages. Two major reasons a higher terms of trade is good for our economy is because over 50% of our exports are commodities, and therefore at a higher price that leads to more income coming into the economy and more revenue. And secondly, over 50% of Australia's import goods are manufactured and intermediate goods with a low elasticity of demand. So therefore, when the price is low, import volumes don't increase much, and therefore the total level of debits falls. And firms benefit from lower cost of production. We get access to capital at a cheaper price, and that provides greater incentives to boost productive capacity. A lower terms of trade can therefore be favourable for supply and help to boost aggregate demand, material living standards, and GDP per capita. A higher terms of trade can be bad for growth, and that would be if it was caused by certain factors. So if the higher terms of trade was caused by higher prices for tourism, perhaps because of inefficiencies in the market or higher wages, that would be a bad thing. This could lead to fewer tourists coming to Australia and increase unemployment. But if the terms of trade increased due to a fall in the price paid for manufactured imports, so for example, if there's cheaper imports for things like motor vehicles, components that we're trying to compete against, that can make local firms less competitive. So if it was caused by cheaper imports for things that we were trying to compete with overseas, it may lead to lost income for Australians. But generally these things that we're importing, we're not trying to compete against, so all we do is benefit from the lower prices. But it's important to be mindful that if it is in an industry where we are trying to compete with imported products, then it can lead to lost income, this idea of lower prices. Alright, just a couple of questions I just want to go through just to end this video. So, question 1, outline 2 major factors that will cause the terms of trade to increase, and to explain why higher terms of trade is considered favourable. So 2 factors you could talk about is increased commodity prices or lower import prices due to cheaper wages. A higher terms of trade is considered favourable as it means we can purchase a greater volume of inputs for any given volume of exports. It often leads to higher incomes for Australians, helps to boost consumption spending, and helps create more jobs and GDP per capita throughout the economy, particularly if it's caused by higher commodity prices. Explain whether an increase in the export index will always lead to a higher terms of trade. Well, no, it won't, because if there's an increase in the export price index, but the import price index increases by more, then the terms of trade will fall. So there's no guarantee the terms of trade will rise just because the export price index has increased. Outline why the terms of trade increased up until 2011, then started to fall. Up until 2011, there was significant demand for iron ore and coal, therefore prices increased, in combination with a reduction in import prices due to cheaper wages. Since 2011, increased global supply, that's the big one, due to investment spending, in combination with slower overseas growth, has reduced the terms of trade, so back to lower levels. Explain how a lower exchange rate can increase the terms of trade. A low exchange rate will increase the terms of trade if Australia's export prices are denominated in foreign currency. So if we're exporting something and we're getting $100 for that, that's the easiest example you can use. A depreciation will mean we're now getting 200 Australian dollars for that product when we were only getting 100, and therefore that leads to higher export prices and will increase the terms of trade. That assumes that import prices stay the same. The dollar goes down, we're getting more currency, we're getting more Australian dollars when we convert that foreign currency back, and therefore that leads to higher export prices. Explain how terms of trade impact strong and sustainable growth and full employment. Okay, mention that it's caused by increased commodity prices and how that leads to increased incomes for miners. This is likely to lead to increased investment. There's the big one, investment. Make sure you talk about that. because firms know they're going to get higher profits. This leads to increased employment and wages, this increased investment. Higher wages in the mining sector also leads to increased consumption. Bang. Therefore, that helps to create revenue and employment in a whole range of other industries. Retail industries, hospitality, they all benefit from the increase in revenue generated and incomes generated by the miners. Overall, aggregate demand is likely to increase, leading to higher real growth of production and GDP per capita, and this will help to achieve the goal of strong and sustainable growth. As I mentioned in class, this is probably a 4 or 5 mark question, because if it does link it to strong and sustainable growth, you want to define the goal to the fastest rate of growth without inflation, external or environmental pressures. A higher terms of trade that is caused by lower import prices, and you could mention this to strengthen your answer, could help reduce firms' costs of production, which might make firms more willing to supply, and that again can help boost our productive capacity and allow for non-inflationary growth. So that's just another direction you could take the question in. Last couple of questions. Explain how the higher terms of trade can impact price stability. If it's caused by, so first define the goal, 2 to 3% CPI on average over the course of the business cycle. Don't mention the trading partners part of the definition. If it's caused by higher commodity prices, this can lead to increased incomes, can boost consumption and investment, and that can lead to demand pull inflation. But if it's caused by lower import prices, this should help lower firms' costs of production and help reduce cost-push inflationary pressures, which should help to keep inflation within our target range. Explain the likely impact of climatic events on the terms of trade. Climatic events are likely to increase the terms of trade because while export volumes might decrease, the price of exports will go up. So it'll increase the price of exports. That could lead to higher coal prices and lead to a higher terms of trade. Explain how the shift in manufacturing to low-wage countries might affect the terms of trade. Again, that's likely to lead to cheaper import prices or to reduce the average price of imports, which should lead to lower firms' cost of production, and provided export prices stay the same, that should increase the terms of trade because the denominator is now smaller.